so often as parents, just as humans, we ask these incredibly predictable questions that are easy to ignore. We ask, "How are you?" And we've been socialized that the answer to "How are you?" is good. Fine. We ask, "How was school?" And we've been socialized that the answer to "How was school?" was good, fine, busy, whatever. And so we ask questions that don't surprise them, that have entirely predictable sort of scripted responses. And then we wait for them to choose to take the extra step and tell us something. And while there are some kids that will, there are a lot of kids that won't.
Welcome to The Power of Family, where we help families talk, listen, and connect across generations. I'm Terry Willis, and today we're talking about something that so many parents face every day. That is, trying to connect with a teen who doesn't seem to want to talk. If you've ever asked a simple question and gotten a one-word answer back, this conversation will really speak to you. We're joined by Dr. Amber Johnson, who is the founder of Bright Threads Leadership Group and a leadership communications expert. Her passion is helping people strengthen relationships and work with more meaning and productivity through better communication and especially better questions. For every parent, grandparent, or caregiver listening, remember this: connection with your teen does not always happen through big conversations. Sometimes it begins with one better question, one patient pause, and one moment where your teen feels truly heard. Please subscribe, follow, leave a review, or share it with someone you love. Every share helps us reach more families who need these conversations. Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up as a guest here on the podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here, and please just call me Amber.
Okay, then I'll break all the protocols here right now.
Exactly. Let's not stand on precedent.
Thank you. Amber, share with the audience about you. Tell us about you here.
Well, I'm a Chicago-based leadership consultant. I own a little company called Bright Threads, and we exist to build leadership development programs for organizations. But my background is in the space between leadership and communications. And I quickly learned as my kids hit their later elementary, early teen years, that communication gets tougher with your family as the kids grow up and are less dependent on you. And so for the last 5-6 years, I've really been focusing on how to help people be not just better leaders, but better parents and partners through asking better questions and through improving their communication as well.
As we begin this podcast, I like to pose the question: why do so many kids in conversations with them, why do they stop at those one pat answers when you're trying to hold a conversation with them? Yes, no.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts.
Well, I'm the mom of 2 teenagers, so I certainly know that experience. And this is a doctor heal thyself situation for me. And I think there's maybe 2 answers to your question, one of which we have more control over than the other. The first is that just biologically, developmentally, the teenage years are years of separation as children develop their own identity and go out to be their own selves in the world. And so it's just normal and appropriate for them to separate from their relationship with their parents. And that's going to involve not giving you as much information as you as a parent or grandparent may want. And to them, your questions can come off as nosy or controlling or intrusive or just less interesting than whatever their friends in their phone are presenting to them. So that's the first reason. And, there are some things we can do to work at the edges of that, but to a large extent, this is just developmentally appropriate or unsurprising, at least. Where we do have more control are the questions that we ask. Because so often as parents, just as humans, we ask these incredibly predictable questions that are easy to ignore. We ask, "How are you?" And we've been socialized that the answer to "How are you?" is good, fine. We ask, "How was school?" And we've been socialized that the answer to "How was school?" was good, fine, busy, whatever. And so we ask questions that don't surprise them, that have entirely predictable sort of scripted responses. And then we wait for them to choose to take the extra step and tell us something. And while there are some kids that will, there are a lot of kids that won't.
Okay. That sounds fair enough. In my dealing with kids, I can relate to that. Okay, then. Well, let's try this one then. What is the difference between a question that shuts a teen down and one that helps them open up?
There are a lot of differences. And I think the first one is that kids have exceptionally strong judgment meters. They can sense any whiff of judgment in a parent or grandparent's voice, and it shuts them down. And so that's the first thing is we ask questions that imply something they're doing isn't right, the clothes they're wearing are wrong, the music they're listening to is wrong, that they should have turned their homework in earlier rather than later, that, whatever it is, there's a whiff of judgment in it. And that stops conversation pretty quickly. And then, like I said earlier, I think predictable questions are part of what stands in the way. And I would also say another thing that shuts people down or keeps them from opening up is when we ask questions about facts instead of asking questions about feelings, about motivations, about priorities, about values, about ideas, about highs and lows and emotions, all of those things. When our questions are, did you turn your homework in? Do you have your shoes packed for soccer practice? Are you going to your friend's house after school? Those are all just fact-based questions, and they don't help us really grow our understanding of each other.
Well, can you share a few, I guess I could say, better questions that parents can start asking right away? If there's a such thing as a better question.
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as guaranteed results. I have to be honest and say that. But there are ways to get to better questions. And I would be curious to hear, you are invested in your children and grandchildren's life. So I'll turn the question back on you in a minute if you have any better questions you recommend too. But, I try to avoid anything that's a closed question, anything that can be answered with one word. And so I might, instead of asking, how was school? I might say, tell me the highlights from your day, or what were the highlights of your day? Instead of saying, how was the test? Tell me about the test. That requires at least a sentence of content. I love developing rituals at the table, and this is great when it starts young. So for any of your listeners that have younger kids, start this now. Start sharing every day people's highs and lows. What were your highs and lows? Some people call it thorns and roses. The good spots and the hard spots in your day. Make that just a regular routine part of your conversation. Sometimes I try to have a little fun with my kids, and I'll say, give today a grade. On an A, B, C, D scale. What was the day? Why? What would it take to go from a B to C tomorrow, or a C to a B tomorrow? Or, you said that the day was really an A plus. What's an A plus day like for you? And then I think another tip is to ask questions that are a little bit more specific. Tell me something funny that happened today. What did you and your friends do during the lunch hour? What's something interesting that happened? Tell me something that you learned. How's soccer making you feel lately? Any of those questions. And one more, and this is, my oldest is just finished freshman year of college and is in a different city for college. And so sometimes we text more than anything. And sometimes I'll just say, send me a random photo from your day, and I'll look for an opportunity to send you a random photo too. And I've gotten everything from the flowers on campus to a picture of their college advisor to, what they're having for lunch. And it's just a quick way to get a glimpse inside their life and to keep those channels of communication open. So any of those things that give you more than one word answer.
And so then what I'm hearing is avoid the one question that's going to lead to a one word answer, and just keep it as an open-ended question. And we all know how to do that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Keep it open. We know those one-word questions. We've got them memorized. You develop a deeper Rolodex for those of us that are a little older of questions that go deeper than that, and questions that are just a little unexpected, that bring a little bit of fun, a little bit of whimsy, or a little bit of specificity into the day.
When you are speaking of open-ended questions and you're speaking of teens, is there such thing as a parameter in which you do, you know where my question is going. Yeah. What are the parameters in which you want to try and keep from asking your child?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And, my oldest, who's 19, recently told me, Mom, sometimes I can just tell you're trying to start a conversation, and it's like Sam can sense my desperation to talk. And, I think kids, like I said, they're really, really good judges of our judgment, of our intentions. I think as parameters, you have to decide what's appropriate for your family. But at least in my family, I try to understand my kids before offering any sense of judgment or advice. And so I try to look at the questions that I'm asking and ask a question I genuinely want the answer to and that I don't know the answer to and I don't have a preconceived opinion around. Because it's those questions that I can ask really authentically without that sense of judgment that other people might have or that they might have experienced from me in the past. So I work on really one of my boundaries is ask questions without judgment.
Got it.
Yeah.
We often talk about parents and teens, but grandparents, they too can be an important part of a family connection as well. How can grandparents ask questions that help teens feel safe, heard, and understood? Especially from my perspective as a grandparent.
Yeah, I love that question, partly because my grandparents were incredibly influential in my life. I never had a babysitter as a kid. We just spent time at grandma's house. I'm curious, Terry, did you grow up close to your grandparents?
Not really. No, not really. But I grew up with an understanding and profoundness of family because I didn't have a grandparent per se. I had a grand uncle. So he was that grandparent in my life there. And I would be so inclined to say that he held that position. And he was firm about it as well.
Yeah. What did you value about that relationship?
His wisdom. And I can never take anything away from his wisdom in all of this, and because he would share that wisdom. And of course, as a child, I would see him as an old man, but even at that young age in which I spent time with him, he would take me out to his cabin with him, and we spend the weekends there together. And I can remember vividly.
And what did you do at the cabin? Did you fish? Did you hike?
Yes, we did a lot of fishing. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, we would sit and talk. And of course, obviously, I can't remember all the conversations, but I hold on to some of them. And that wisdom that he passed on to me, and just the thought of us sitting there, as I grew older, I understood what that meant. That meant the family bonding. That meant the family sharing. That also meant me carrying on the rituals of family.
Yeah. Passing the belief in family on to younger generation through those hours spent together. Yeah.
Because I see so much of it now. And as we both know, the tendency now of a lot of young people, they want to stray away from families and estrange themselves from families. And that to me it hurts. It hurts because it is the breakdown of family. And as you go through life, you understand that you need each other.
We do need each other. Yeah.
It's survival. It's survival.
Your story of your granduncle really affirms something that I believe, and I don't have the research to back this up. This is an experiential learning, but everybody I know that is close to an older generation that has had a grandparent, or in your case, a granduncle, or sometimes you got the neighbor, and everybody loves Mrs. Jacobson. And, even though she's not related, almost all of those relationships, in my observation, are based in doing together rather than talking together. And then the talking comes because of the time you spend doing things. So you spent time fishing and hanging out at the cabin. And of course, eventually you begin to talk in those settings. But the first was the doing, the time spent together actively with your hands involved, with your eyes in another direction. And I feel like that's really important at the grandparent level, that you build doing relationships as much as you're physically able with your grandchildren. In my case, I had one set of grandparents that were farmers, and I would just ride in the tractor with my grandpa. And my grandma would take us swimming. And another set of grandparents, my grandpa was a farm electrician, and my grandma was the Avon lady in town. And I would go with her on every Avon run, and I would pack up her bags of Avon to deliver to her customers. And I'd bake cookies with her in the kitchen. And in all those hours spent together doing those things, I came I could pick up the pieces of their wisdom. I could turn to them for advice. But it was always about doing over talking. And so I think in my observation, strong relationships are often built between grandparents and kids that way. To find something you like doing together, playing dominoes, baking cookies, walking the dog, and spend time together doing those things. And over time, then the relationship really develops together. I don't know. Does that feel true to you?
It makes all the sense in the world to me because I'm presently dealing with one of my other grandchildren, the one who actually got this started with me, the one that came to talk with me.
Mm-hmm.
She said something to us one day when we were recording her, but the camera wasn't running.
Mm.
And she said to me, and it took all of our mouths dropped. She said, "Where were you?" And in the totality of that, "Where were you?" I know that she meant, where were you that we didn't spend time together?
Mm.
Not a phone call,
Mm-hmm.
not a text, but I grasped the totality of what she was saying there.
Mm-hmm.
Because she had previously spoken about the other grandparents and how they were there to take them here and take them there. I understood it. I was afar because I lived in another state, and that rings loud still today. When those words were spoken, we all just dropped our mouths.
Yeah.
Where were you? And that "where were you" is time spent together.
And it is so hard. You know, I grew up in the same town, both sets of grandparents within 5 minutes of where my folks live. My kids have never had that. We've been 3 to 4 hours away at a minimum, and some people you're continents away. And so it takes extra effort. And that effort has to come from the grandparent, I think, to find ways to spend that time together.
And that's exactly what I'm doing, because I know that, let's call it what it is at my age, it could happen any day. Anytime, whoever, for that matter, it could happen to any of us any day, any time. But I know that my time to physically spend quality time with them, it has its limits. So I am looking to, I'm not going to say make up for lost time. I'm going to say do what I can to still bridge that bridge and being together, coming together. And I will.
I love that. And I have one more thing I want to run by you and see if this makes sense to you as a grandparent, because I've been thinking about this question a lot. And I think, as parents, it's our responsibility to make sure our children grow up to be independent, that they grow up to be good citizens in the world. Maybe you're concerned about passing on your worldview, your faith background, that they just meet their academic needs. We've got all of these worries. And I think as a grandparent, I anticipate it will be tough to turn that side of me off, that's worried about the moral and character building and responsibility building side of my grandchildren when I someday have them. Thankfully, I don't have any yet. And I wonder, though, if a grandparent's primary responsibility is to delight in the child, let the parent be the parent and work on pulling back any sense of judgment, any sense of responsibility. Not if your grandchild brings you a question, of course, give them your response, but let the parenting be done by the parents. And as a grandparent, delight and support. There's another idea I'm testing out, and I would love to get your take on it because I'm not a grandparent yet, thankfully. And that is that, as a parent, it's my job to worry about my child's moral upbringing, their character development, their work ethic, their grades. And so we have to parent. That's our responsibility. And as a grandparent, I imagine it's hard to turn off those same instincts to correct, to guide, to advise, to shepherd the child morally or their character development. But that is the parent's job and not the grandparent's job. And so I think one of the gifts that grandparents can give children is to give them an adult who just delights in them, who just loves their presence, takes joy in it, does not offer too much correction, except for those moments where it's just desperately needed or the advice is asked. Let the parents parent, and as a grandparent, delight in the child, engage with the child, be a safe space of support for the child. And I'm not yet a grandparent, so I'm curious to know if that makes sense to you, who's held both positions of parent and grandparent, or if I'm off track there.
No, you're not off track. but I'm going to add another dimension to this. And that is, from my environment, a lot of the grandparents, unfortunately, they have to take on the role as parents. And I see an awful lot of that. And it's not fundamentally right, but what is fundamentally right when it comes to a family? It is about whomever is of the sound body and mind to step forward and lead. Mm-hmm. That is that person who's needed. But going back to me as a grandparent directly, I concur with you because it is the parent's job to raise their child. Mm-hmm. And there can become conflict when the grandparent, they want to impose their fundamental beliefs onto the grandchild, and it conflicts with the parents. So it's a thin line. Yeah. And it's a thin line ice that we must walk on as well. I hope I have answered that question that someone can say, well, is he trying to avoid the answer? No, I'm not. It's just that it's just a grandparenting to me is more difficult than parenting because you have your child between you and the grandchild, whereas the parent only has the direct communication with the child. So you have to be cautious and you have to be a mindset to, I don't want to say wrestle with it, but just work with it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. What you're reminding me is that guidelines that we sometimes receive are great when every generation of the family is healthy and functioning well, and that we need to be there for the kids in whatever capacity is most needed. That's our priority as adults. And sometimes as a grandparent, you're going to play the role functionally of a parent. You're absolutely right.
Yes. And I just wanted to, again, insert that in here because sometimes it's not just straight and narrow.
Nope.
It's a winding road here.
Yep. But we can always ask ourselves, what's my role here? And find that right fit.
You're right. What should parents do when they ask a thoughtful question and still do not get much feedback?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to ask this question so that we can get an open answer here that perhaps your answer can be carried with someone who will be listening.
Yeah. I think when my kids were babies, I got some parenting advice that stuck with me. And it's applied to babies, but hopefully we can find the metaphor in it. And that is, your kid one day would just love green beans. Your little 6 or 9-month-old would just love green beans. And the next day you fix green beans and they spit them out. And then the day after that, they'll eat nothing but yogurt. And then 2 days later, yogurt is just disgusting to them. And then one day it's nothing but blueberries. Those are some nasty diapers, but they really love their blueberries. And what someone told me is that think about your child's nutrition over the course of the week and not over the course of the day. That when you worry about it day to day, it's too small an increment. But you can have a healthy child who eats green beans on Monday and blueberries on Tuesday and yogurt on Wednesday, and it'll be just fine. And I think that that's true when it comes to communication with our kids. If I ask my kids tonight at supper and, to tell me about their day and I get non-responses or superficial responses, I'm not going to worry on Monday. I'm not going to worry if it's 2 or 3 days of that. But if a stretch of time happens that the nutritious conversation isn't happening over the course of this longer time period, that's when I would start to get concerned. So the first question a parent who gets a non-response can ask is, did I have a good conversation last week or yesterday? Am I likely to have a good one tomorrow? If so, I'm just going to let this one slide. I'm not going to push in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And because as you were sharing that, I'm thinking, okay, once a teen does open up, how should parents respond?
Yeah, play it cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Be cool, calm, and collective. Never let them see you sweat, right?
Yeah. Let's say, you finally do get the right time and the right location. Windshield time in a car or a walk in the park is always fabulous. And your kid opens up and maybe they share something hard or they're feeling something difficult. One of the best pieces of advice a friend who's a little further along in the parenting journey than I am, she gave me is do not get on the roller coaster with your child. Let them have their emotions and you be this steady, safe environment. So I think that's important. Don't get on the roller coaster. Ask questions, show interest, but don't push because they will start to smell. If you're rushing in at the open door, they're going to smell that and not like it. So just be open and don't try to fix it for them. If they're bringing a problem, you can ask them, do you want me to help? Or do you just need me to make sure to hear this? Is it helping or hearing right now? What's more important? And don't discredit anything they share. They may share some drama that's happening with the best friend at school, and it may seem to you like, this is not going to matter in a week. But if you say, this doesn't matter, that's silly, they're never going to tell you anything again. So just affirm, validate their feeling. It must feel really terrible when your friend talks to you that way, or it must feel isolating not to have this sense of closeness you used to have in that relationship. So don't discredit their emotions. Don't fix the situation or rush in to fix unless they're specifically asking for it. Don't push too much and kind of play it cool. Don't get on the roller coaster with them. Those are the things. So that's my list of don'ts. And then I have some do's, but I am...
I do share.
Yeah. The first is do give them an opportunity to keep talking. And one of the ways I find that works well is an active listening technique called the last 3 words. And the idea of the last 3 words is when someone takes a break and they're sharing something difficult and then they pause, they're looking for you to affirm that you want them to continue. And you can give them that signal by just repeating the last 2 or 3 or 4 words that they said. So your student tells you this story about a teacher who's being totally unfair and the assignment's really hard and they're feeling stressed and overwhelmed and whatever it is. And they end on that stressed and overwhelmed. You can just say stressed and overwhelmed. And that's an invitation to continue. It doesn't have a question mark at the end, but it's a question that says, tell me more. And they'll talk a little longer and then you can do it again. You're feeling like there's too much on your plate. And then they'll hear that they're being heard, they're being understood and continue. And I find that's really helpful.
Speaking of feeling like there's too much on the plate, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction here, or my next train of thought here. And that is, everything sounds good here is good when a parent and a child, they have that open communication. But as we know, a lot of kids nowadays are estranging themselves from their parents. Mm-hmm. Can you speak on that? Because that is something that's very troubling.
Yeah. At its deepest level, when the estrangement already happens, that's time for professional help. It's time for a therapist, a counselor, someone who can advise at those deeper levels. And that's not my background. My PhD is in leadership. But we can try to intervene earlier and prevent that from happening. When we look at groups and teams in the workplace, one of the things we know from that research is that every human have 2 competing needs inside themselves. We need to be seen as unique and we need to know we belong. And those 2 things compete against each other because often to show belonging, we feel like we have to conform, and to be seen as unique, we feel like we have to be distinct and stand out from others. And you can see how that could play out in a teenager's mind as they're trying to figure out, how do I feel like I belong inside my family and still be me in all the ways I am not my parents, all the ways I am different from my siblings or from my neighbors or from my friends. And so they're pushing for this uniqueness and this sense of belonging. And I think one of the things we can do to help prevent estrangement before it becomes a real issue is to honor kids in their uniqueness, to find what is unique about them and celebrate it and make it safe inside your family, make it part of the conversation, develop a shared hobby or habit around it if you can. And if you can't, just make it possible for them to explore their uniqueness on their own and still have your acceptance, your approval, your encouragement, that they don't have to be many versions of you in order to have your love. That can be difficult in just average adolescent development. It's really hard for kids who are going through very tough times, who are dealing with substance abuse or mental health issues or real senses of estrangement. And that's when seeking help, I think, is just absolutely essential because every situation is going to be so different from each other.
Yes, it is.
But uniqueness and belonging are good places to start.
Yes, it is. How do better questions build more trust, connection, and healing in a family?
That's a great question. I want to tell a story that comes from a book written by somebody else, and that's really about romantic relationships rather than parenting relationships, but I think it's true. This book comes from Lori Gottlieb. She's a psychiatrist and a New York Times bestselling author and columnist on all of the big papers across the world. And she wrote a book called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And in it, she tells the story of this couple, a married couple who go to a therapist's office they're working on their marriage. And the wife turns to her husband and says, "Do you know what the three most romantic words are in the English language? Even more romantic than I love you." And you can imagine the husband, he tries some things. He's trying to come up with what are those three words? And he says, "You are beautiful." That's not what she's thinking of. And he tries, "I was wrong," which, lots of us like to hear from our partners, but was also not what this wife was thinking of. And then she says, "No, the three most romantic words are, I understand you."
Wow. I understand you.
I understand you.
And
I
as
think
a partner, yes,
as
as
a
a partner,
partner,
as a partner, that's what you want to hear.
it's that uniqueness that I
Yeah.
understand you and your uniqueness. Your head doesn't work like my head works. Your choices aren't going to be my choices every time. And you get to be you, and you still belong. We belong together. And I don't think that's limited to romantic relationships. I'm convinced that we need it, and parent-child relationships, we need it. And I need it. I'm 50. I need it from my mom, who's 75. I need that sense of understanding still. We need it at work. We need it in our community. In fact, being misunderstood is one of the first things that happens as people begin to isolate socially. And that is what leads to conspiracy theories and the polarization that happens in society. So if we want to prevent that polarization in our families, we've got to find a way to understand each other in our uniqueness and still provide that sense of belonging. And I think questions are just a very, the absolute starting place for that. Finding ways to ask questions without judgment, with genuine curiosity, with great positive regard and intent. And then we have to pair that with really active listening so that we get what the person is really saying, not the pretty words that they're dressing up so that they don't feel judged by you, that their real meaning, their real truth.
Spoken well. Spoken well.
Mm-hmm.
As we begin to wind down here, let me ask, what is one question families can begin using today? When
we become too reliant on one question, then your kids learn how to dodge it. So there is no one consistent question. You've got to be a little unpredictable and a lot curious. And I have a newsletter that I write each week that has questions. And when people sign, it's a free newsletter. And when they sign up for it, they actually get a download that's 50 alternatives to how are you? So it's a good starting place of 50 different options for families. But beyond that, one that I have had a really good conversation with recently, I just flew to Philadelphia to drive my oldest back from college from the end of their freshman year. And I said, when you look back on this season, this freshman year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you don't remember the day-to-day of it so much, you just think back about these milestones. What are you going to remember about this freshman year? Like, how has it shaped you? What will matter most about it? And we had a great, probably 30-minute conversation, windshield time conversation, which is always fabulous. And I think that's a really adaptable question to help get to understand where teens are about something. When you look back at your soccer career, now that you're captain of the team, or now that you've decided you're not going to play for your junior year, what do you think you're going to remember about it? What did you learn from it? What were the highlight reels of that career? Your soccer practice, your soccer playing. The same thing with this class. So you just finished this incredible class at school. When you look back from it 10 years from now, what are you going to remember about that experience? Is it the teacher? Is it the friend you sat by? Is there content that inspired you? I like that putting that distance on the question, because it lets the person not feel like I'm getting nosy in their day-to-day. I'm trying to get at the real understanding of who they are.
Amber, what tools would you suggest a person put in their toolbox so that they can relate better with their child?
These are all idea tools instead of material tools. There's probably apps out there that ask you good questions, or certainly if you just Google alternatives to how are you or questions to ask your kid or fun icebreaker questions, you can find all sorts of lists. Those are a decent place to start. But the two tools I think are absolutely essential are learning how to ask better questions, being less predictable, asking questions for feelings and understanding rather than facts. And the second tool is active listening. As a parent, I'm so busy. It's so easy for my kids to tell me something and for it to go in one ear and out the other. But if I really want my kids to know I care, if I really want to understand what's going on, I need to listen, and I got to listen with my eyes and my gut as well as just my ears. And so do some reading on active listening, find some good podcasts on it, pick up some tips, practice it daily, and then quiz yourself afterwards. When you leave a conversation with your kids, repeat back to yourself, what did I learn in this conversation? And you will find that your memory is better and that you can apply that in future situations, that knowledge that you gained in future situations, and that your kids will open up more because they will feel heard, not just listened to, but like truly heard and appreciated.
I can relate to that. I truly can, because I'm thinking back to my interactions with my kid and the grandkids. So thank you for that. If a person wants to reach you, how can they reach you? How can they follow you? How can they just get in touch with you?
Yeah. The best place is if you're a Substack user, which Substack is a newsletter website, look for the newsletter Better Than Fine. The idea is that we're going to ask questions that get us answers better than fine. So not how are you, because that's what we just get the fine answer. It's a free newsletter, comes out every Thursday morning, designed to help you be a better leader, partner, and parent through your communication. And that's a fabulous way to find me. And when you sign up there, you get free access to that list of 50 alternatives to how are you. So good list to get started with as well.
Is there a web address?
Sure. Folks can find me on LinkedIn, Amber Anderson Johnson, or at my website, Bright Threads Leadership.
Amber Johnson, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure, Terry. Thank you for helping us think about how to have meaningful family relationships through the generations.
So this week, try moving beyond how was school. Ask a question that invites honesty, listen without rushing to fix, and keep showing up with love and curiosity. Thank you for joining us on The Power of Family. If this conversation spoke to you, please subscribe, follow, leave a review, or share it with someone you love. Every share helps us reach more families who need these conversations. Until next time, keep talking, keep listening, and keep building the kind of family connection that helps every generation feel safe, seen, and understood.